Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're looking at international trade. But honestly, forget the dry, abstract economic theories for a second. We're going to look at this like it's a massive, high-stakes global game. It's a game complete with its own strict global rules, referees, and some incredibly elaborate defense mechanisms. I mean, if you've ever stopped to wonder why your electronics cost exactly what they do, or why massive global supply chains sometimes just grind to a sudden halt, you are absolutely in the right place. Today, we are decoding the international laws and the complex trade barriers that basically govern how the entire world does business.
So, here's our quick roadmap for today. We're going to break this all down into 6 chapters: the global trade game, tools of the trade, why put up walls, the global rulebook, referees and rule breakers, and finally, winners and losers. Let's just jump right in.
Chapter 1. The Global Trade Game, Understanding the Board. To really grasp how nations compete on this global scale, we first have to understand the boundaries they set up to defend their home turf.
Now, economists absolutely love the idea of unhindered free trade, right? The whole theory of comparative advantage, the idea that nations should just specialize in what they do best and trade for the rest. But in reality, governments don't usually play by those rules. Instead, they constantly rely on trade barriers. Basically, anytime a government steps in to deliberately alter the price or limit the availability of foreign goods, they're setting up a trade barrier. It's a strategic move to impose costs on outsiders and protect their own domestic economy, effectively tilting the playing field in their favor.
Chapter 2. Tools of the Trade, the Defense Mechanisms.
So, there's a really clear divide in how countries actually play defense here. On one side, we have explicit taxes, which are known as tariffs. These are straightforward financial burdens slapped directly on imported goods right at the border. But on the other side, we have non-tariff barriers, or NTBs, and these are much, much sneakier. We're talking about things like import quotas, endless bureaucratic red tape, super-specific licensing requirements, or even arbitrary quality standards. They aren't a direct tax, but honestly, they act exactly like one, because they drastically increase the cost and the headache of getting foreign products into the local market.
And these defense weapons can be incredibly targeted. A country might decide to charge a specific tariff based purely on the physical weight of a product being imported. Or they might use what's called a double-column discriminatory tariff. This essentially means they charge entirely different tax rates depending on the country of origin. So, for example, a nation might impose massive duties on goods coming from Australia while offering really low preferential rates for the exact same goods coming from Thailand. It's a highly customizable defense mechanism.
But hey, sometimes nations just bypass the subtle taxes entirely and go straight for the nuclear option, the embargo. While technically it's an extreme type of quota, a quota of literally zero, it's almost always deployed as a political weapon rather than a purely economic one. It completely halts the flow of goods to or from a specific country, and whether it's applied to just a single commodity or to all trade across the board, an embargo creates massive economic fallout for all the players involved.
Chapter 3. Why put up walls? Strategies and motivations.
Okay, so if economists widely agree that free trade is the best way to build global wealth, why do countries keep throwing up these aggressive walls? Well, it's all about protecting their vulnerabilities. First up, there's anti-dumping. This is when foreign producers, like huge multinationals or cartels, try to flood a market with products priced way below cost just to drive local competitors into bankruptcy. Tariffs block that predatory move. Second, there's national defense. A nation simply cannot rely completely on foreign countries for artillery, ammunition, or critical tech, because if a conflict breaks out, those supply chains could vanish instantly. And finally, we have infant industries. Think of this like putting training wheels on a bike. Governments will shield a fragile, brand-new domestic sector so it has a fighting chance to grow before getting absolutely crushed by established global giants.
Chapter 4. The Global Rulebook, Creating Order.
With all these crazy defense mechanisms flying around, the global economy desperately needs a referee to prevent total chaos. And that is exactly where the World Trade Organization steps in. To manage this, the WTO relies on an alphabet soup of international laws that govern practically everything in our modern world. You have the GATT for physical goods, the GATS for international services, and TRIPS, which sets the minimum global rules for intellectual property like patents and copyrights. Then there's the SPS agreement. This ensures that health and safety standards, like the pesticides used on imported food, are actually legitimate, rather than just being disguised trade barriers.
Now, to even sit at the table and play this game, nations have to agree to 5 core pillars. The biggest one is non-discrimination, often called most favored nation treatment. Basically, if you grant a special trade favor to one WTO member, you have to grant it to all of them. You also have to guarantee reciprocal market access, stick to your published ceiling bindings, meaning no randomly jacking up your tariffs overnight, and maintain total transparency. But the system is realistic. It does include safety valves, which allow for temporary barriers if there's a genuine health or national security emergency.
Chapter 5. Referees and Rule Breakers, Fouls and Penalties.
Let's picture what happens when those international laws actually get broken, because it usually triggers this vicious cycle of retaliation. Imagine on day 1, country A pumps billions into subsidizing a new tech sector, totally violating trade rules. By day 30, country B feels threatened by these cheap goods and slaps countervailing duties on them to offset that unfair advantage. Well, country A gets angry about that and by day 60 retaliates with brand new discriminatory tariffs. Boom! Suddenly you have a full-blown trade war that's raising prices for everyone and shredding global value chains. It's right at this boiling point that the WTO's dispute settlement mechanism, the referee, has to frantically step in and try to de-escalate things before the entire board flips.
Chapter 6. Winners and Losers. Who really pays? Over the decades, the WTO actually did a pretty good job of forcing countries to drop those traditional tariffs. But did nations suddenly embrace free trade? No way. They just got sneakier. Data from the UN shows that while traditional price control barriers dropped all the way to 15%, complex technical and environmental non-tariff barriers exploded to 85%. Essentially, countries replaced simple, obvious taxes with maddeningly complex labeling requirements and arbitrary safety standards just to covertly block foreign competition. And the real-world costs of all this game playing is staggering. Whenever a government puts up a trade barrier, the benefits almost always go to a very tiny, highly specific group of domestic stakeholders, maybe local steel producers or a certain agricultural sector. But the cost? That's spread out among all of us. By limiting product choices and stifling foreign competition, everyday consumers are quietly forced to pay artificially high prices for lower quality goods. It effectively functions as a hidden consumer tax, one that most of us don't even realize we're paying at the checkout counter.
But you know, the harshest penalty in this whole game definitely falls on the developing world. Because wealthy countries have the power to write the global rulebook, developing nations often find themselves totally locked out. For instance, a developing nation might be incredible at agricultural production, but their exports get completely blocked by massive tariffs from rich nations. Or even worse, rich nations use their immense wealth to subsidize their own farmers and then just dump all that overproduction on the world market, which entirely devastates poor country farmers. Even today, fully processed foods face significantly higher tariffs than raw materials, a strategy seemingly designed specifically to keep developing nations from moving up the economic value chain.
Which brings us to the ultimate question for our global future. Right now, we're watching the world increasingly retreat into regional blocs, populist protectionism, and massive government subsidies for frontier technologies. So we really have to ask ourselves, is the system designed to keep the global trade game fair finally reaching its breaking point? Will the WTO's global rules actually survive this century, or are we entering a new era where tit-for-tat trade wars tear the whole board apart? That is absolutely what you need to keep your eye on. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the rules of the game.